Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last talk of the day. Glad you're able to kind of make it out. Can you all hear me okay? If you can't just... Exactly. If you want to win some sweet headphones, you got to stick around to the very end so you can see the big wheel and yell again, which I think will get us enough energy to get out the door into the nice Buffalo weather. Just wanted to let you know, hoping to go like 35, 40 minutes at the most. I tend to talk fast though, so we might infinitely shorten that. So happy to take any questions you might have. Without further ado, we'll start to kind of dive into things. So I'm Levi Neuland. I'm the Senior Vice President of Digital Marketing at the Martin Group. We're an integrated advertising agency headquartered here in Buffalo, offices in Rochester, Albany, and New York City. I oversee our digital marketing team, so focus a lot of the top end of the kind of digital strategy, back-end analytics, automation, website development, social media, probably way too much, but when it comes to AI conversations, we're obviously very much in the mix across all of that. Today's talk is not going to be whether or not you should be using AI. There are definitely some very real environmental, ethical, and financial concerns about how all of this is working. That'd be a very different dark talk to end this conference on. Going to be a little bit lighter on that, but I would recommend everybody, just be skeptical in the things that you're using, and as more information comes out, dig into it and kind of make your own judgment calls on that. What we're really here to do is to talk a bit about AI and how we really want to make sure we're not losing ourselves as we're moving forward with using these tools. It's a very disruptive technology. There's a lot about it that seems to threaten some aspects of what we do, or at least disrupt the status quo of kind of how we work in a day-to-day. And through kind of some self-reflection on my side, stuff we've done at the agency I work for, we've kind of put some things into place to help steer ourselves in the right direction. So I'm hoping some of that can influence some of your thinking leaving today, kind of figure out what works best for you. But before we can kind of get into all the fun part of this, I did want to make sure we're kind of on the same page of kind of how we're feeling or what we're kind of saying and feeling about AI out there. So I'm going to be going through a quick series of items that you may be familiar with. If it's something you have heard before, said yourself, or have felt internally, just put your hand up. And if we go to the next one, if you haven't, put your hand down. We'll see how in sync we are. If we're not in sync, I might just need to close the laptop and walk out. So this will be a really short end. You'll win the headphones even quicker, so I guess it's a win-win for everybody. So first up, AI is coming for my job. Have you heard that? Have you felt it? Have you said it yourself? Okay, got a few folks here. Everyone's an AI expert now. A little bit of that, a little bit less. Okay, you're much better crowds than I am online. That's fantastic. New model dropped. Okay, more people there. Oh, it's outdated already? Okay, it happened again. And please don't say AI again. Most people here, excellent. Based on an American Psychological Association survey, 57% of workers said that the rise of AI is a major source of personal stress. Pew Research had a separate study that had 65% of marketers reporting that they felt consistently overwhelmed by AI in general. My perspective from that is you're definitely allowed to be tired of this. It's a lot to be taking on. None of us signed up for this. It was kind of thrust upon us. However, it's a reality that it's here. Now, sentiment around AI is definitely shifting. This time next year, we might not be talking about AI. It might have a really cool new name like the metaverse. Maybe they'll try that again. But the underlying tools and technology will still be there, and probably more evolved than they are today. It'll still be evolving and changing the way we work. So we really can't be too complacent about it. You can be tired and still take action. Like when I wake up in the morning and I exercise, not because I'm really thrilled to do it, it's because I know it has a positive benefit on my future and where I want to go and where I want to be. I kind of picture AI in the same way. It's kind of odd though, as all this stuff started coming up in the workplace and all of these new technologies, it felt very disruptive and things we were trying to wrap our heads around. I had a coworker ask me, why are you so calm about all of this? It's kind of freaking me out. You should be more worried or concerned or stressed. I didn't really have an answer for them. I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I started to really think back to it. And there's something, as I dug deeper back, that was like, oh, this is probably why I'm a little bit more familiar with, or I'm more familiar with the situation, therefore it's probably why I'm not being as freaked out. And part of that just stems from the fact that I have a degree in game design. So like a lot of folks in the marketing and advertising industry, my degree has absolutely nothing to do with what I did for a living. So technically my parents were right when they were like, you're getting a degree in what? And yeah, it kind of bore out. However, my game design degree was actually a big reason why I got into this space. partially because of this fantastic tool that I want to talk about for a minute. Does anybody here recognize this icon? Oh, geez, yes. So Macromedia Flash, which eventually became Adobe Flash, was one of the biggest tools online for creating immersive interactive experiences. Early 2000s, it was all the rage. It's a tool that I actually started dabbling with and probably starting to date myself in high school to just do goofy animations. I did an AP physics presentation because I really didn't want to use PowerPoint. And I just kind of dabbled and had fun with it, playing around as much as I could because it was a fun hobby to have. And then eventually, when I got done with my degree and realized I didn't want to move to Florida or California to work for a game company, I started exploring options when it came to web design. And this tool is actually that ladder to kind of get me into this space. I don't know how many people who were big fans of the Barbie Girls website in the early 2000s, but if so, I contributed to your life in some way, which is a fantastic connection to have. Early part of my career was actually really fun. Looking back on it and making this presentation, I'm like, oh man, my work used to be pretty wild. Like, why did they let me do any of this back then? But I was working with lead developers as a junior developer, doing a lot of the grunt work to help support making things like this. I did a lot of localization work, translating games like this into 27 plus languages, debugging things that didn't work from people that were paid much more on the West Coast, but it was my job to fix it and make it happen. And throughout my career, I was also able to eventually make my own games from scratch for some really cool brands like Power Wheels and also some toy products that no longer exist. It was really great to be able to kind of, take those initial skills I had, build them up even further and learn more about how this whole ecosystem worked and, really have a really awesome start to my career. And then this happened. Steve Jobs decided to release the iPhone, which at its time, now we look at the iPhone and we're like, yeah, it's one of the most innovative devices that has ever existed. The iPhone in 2007, when it came out, a few years into my career of being a professional Flash developer, was impressive and interesting, but nobody knew what it would become. It definitely changed the way people interact with the internet. At the time, it was very much in its infancy, but it is the reason why we shifted from desktop to the computers in our pocket. Another fun quirk is that when the iPhone first came out, it had no apps. It was just websites, music, and your phone. And it didn't support Flash, which, it's a new device. It's not that uncommon. It's totally fine, Someday it will get there. A little bummed because I like technology. I make Flash websites predominantly, and it doesn't support it, but it'll eventually get there. In 2010, Steve Jobs decided to write an open letter called Thoughts on Flash, where he basically ripped Adobe Flash a new one and proclaimed it will never appear on the iPhone, ever. That was in 2010. By 2011, Adobe abandoned all pursuit of ever getting Flash onto any mobile device whatsoever. Around the same time, mobile web development was evolving. The concept of the responsive web was kind of in its infancy, but the technology was getting there. More and more businesses are saying, hey, we need to think about our mobile strategy because, in that 3-year span, touchscreen devices got infinitely more popular. This is how people are researching and finding information. So we need to have a presence there. So when Steve Jobs says Flash is never coming here, Flash is not part of any conversation. It was such a public thing as well that businesses took up the same perspective as Steve Jobs and said, yeah, Flash is horrible. We never want to touch it again, even though it had some real practical uses. So ultimately, my career was over. And that was it. But I'm here, so obviously some other things changed. But Flash died around 2017 or so, it was officially done. But honestly, shortly after that letter, demand for utilizing it for anything non-critical shifted pretty quickly. But what died was ultimately the medium. The craft still continued to survive. To give Flash its props, it was truly an innovator in the online space, not only for animations and interactive kind of experiences, but online video. YouTube wouldn't exist without Flash having existed at the time. Web fonts first existed in any capacity within Flash. It was very convoluted to get them to work, but you could do custom typefaces on a website. Scalable vector graphics or SVGs. Flash was one of the first places you could utilize those online. It really led to a lot of strong advancements that helped move the internet forward. I would even argue that the internet after the time period where Flash died was really not as fun for an extremely long period of time. The weird internet kind of scaled back quite a bit, and it's taken a long while to kind of get web experience to the point of where they are now. But I was able to use a lot of those skills that I had learned regarding, state-based animations, bugging capabilities, localization, how to handle assets, inheriting stuff from other people, to shift over to where the industry was going. my craft could still continue, as did a lot of other companies who are working in the space. So I've dealt with some of those more drastic career shifts where it's like, whoa, things are changing, what's happening? And the most important part of that was just making sure that I was still looking to where things were going and weren't, not staying stuck in my ways of saying, well, no, Flash is going to be the future. Just being realistic that things evolve. That said, we're talking about a medium shifting, people's priorities slightly and going in a different direction. In the case of AI, it's a little bit different. It's about the potential for somebody saying, hey, I can make a website in 30 seconds. And as a marketing and advertising agency, we'd look at it and say, well, it'll take us about 3 months. So it's a little bit more of a quote unquote threat to what we're doing. Still not really that shaken by it, but I do take these headlines and these tools seriously and do consider what that exactly means for me and how we work as an organization. So what it makes me do is just kind of take a step back and reflect on why my work matters. In context, we'll say of the website, because I think it's a good example. I've led projects through both success and failure. Not a lot of people post about the projects that completely bombed in their online portfolio. So as these AI tools are searching online to tell people the best way to go about things, it's, telling the best possible story of it. There's a lot behind any portfolio piece that everything seems great. That probably was very difficult, very challenging, and potentially a lot of false starts. So since I know what can help make a website work or not work, that gives me a certain level of expertise I could bring to the table to help coach a client or a website from the starting point to its end point. I've supported projects post-launch. So great, you made a website in 30 seconds, but then what? Websites aren't etched in stone. They do evolve over time. Businesses change, priorities change, surrounding technology evolves. So what happens after your 30-second website needs a deeper update in a few years? What happens if that company decides to deprioritize making AI websites? These things aren't maybe necessarily as stable as you might think, so it's something you do have to kind of consider. I'm also willing to go where AI potentially can't. I don't know if any of you have ever really just fought with any chatbot to do the simplest possible task of move the thing to the left. No, move the thing to the left. Or try to move things to the right, and then it still just does it wrong. And it seems like it should understand, but it can't. In the case of making a website in 30 seconds, great, it didn't do it the way you want to. I can open up the underlying code and make tweaks. I can figure out how this thing works and get it to where it needs to get to. The AI tool won't necessarily have as much grace about making those finer details or finer edits. As far as I know, Claude doesn't have a phone number to call Claude the man. You kind of just have to keep asking it to do things as much as you can. The best case, I think, is you can go ask Gemini what you should say to Claude to make Claude do what you want it to do. Whereas, I have clients who I haven't talked to in 10 years who will pick up the phone and call me and be like, hey, I have an SEO question. And I'm like, who is this? Oh, okay. And, we'll walk through things. But that ability to have an actual person to bounce it off of, not even because that person has a solution, because I'm sure you've all run into this. Sometimes you're trying to solve a problem and you start to explain it to somebody, and halfway through you realize you've solved your own problem. You say thanks and you move on with your day. That human element can actually help with the overall troubleshooting and how you are working through some of those challenges. And end of the day, if I had a client who said, hey, I'm going to make a website using this tool and it's going to be done in 30 seconds, I'd say, great, go for it. That's totally fine. If it's something that makes sense to them, I'm not going to argue with their business sense around it. Do I think they might have challenges? Sure. If they needed my help on something, I might be open to it. But if somebody were to say to me, I can make a website in 30 seconds and I can make it better than you can, I'd be like, all right, let's go for it. Because I bet my experience and my background and my knowledge would help me wield that tool infinitely better than you can to get to that end product. I am bringing more expertise, knowledge, and lived experience to the table, which isn't nothing regarding that overall kind of ability to leverage these tools to the fullest or ignore them completely to do a better job for the end product. Now, that's great for me. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. But when we think about it from a company standpoint, what if it's not me that's doing the work? What if we have a new hire that's coming in the door? It's like, hey, I've never done any of this. I've only had classes on the theory. Well, that becomes a little bit of a problem. So as an agency, we did have to start to wrap our head around how can everyone have more ownership and control? And that's not only with the ability and encouragement to make the decisions to get to a better end product, to not sit back and say, this is good enough, but also to help kind of rip some of that knowledge of our lived experiences out so that other people can learn from it in a more digestible way. So, very heady thing. I'll get a little bit lighter for a moment here. as an agency, before we even thought about, hey, let's get everybody a cloud license, let's start using this, whatever, let's set up some agents to do anything we wanted to do, we really took a step back and said, well, we are who we are from a cultural standpoint, from an intention of what we want to do and grow, how we want to grow as a business. So we need a perspective on how we're approaching all of our decision-making around AI moving forward to make sure we're staying true to ourselves and we are getting to that end result we want to. Like any other thing you might be doing in marketing and advertising, we need to have requirements, expectations, and goals to make sure that we are doing this to the best of our ability. So one of the key things that we did was making sure that, this wasn't going to be, any advancement we were doing wasn't going to be held entirely by our executive team. They have a lot of different priorities. They have a lot of different kind of thoughts around what should be happening that are completely different than an employee who's doing the day-to-day work. We wanted to make sure that if something was important to the people at the agency, it wasn't gonna, die on the vine there. So what we ended up doing is setting up a 3-tiered system, a steering committee. It's kind of mainly involving the executive team that sets our big picture goals, makes any sort of financial or time commitments of here's where we're gonna spend our money or our time to move us forward. They're also responsible for the super fun part of the data privacy and security aspect of AI, because honestly, nobody else probably wants to deal with that. And it is important for a company of our size to make sure that we are following best practices, especially when it involves our data or clients' data. The next tier down from that, we have our AI activation team. They're like the quarterbacks. They're the people that are most passionate about the AI space, representatives across all of our respective teams. They are the ones that are helping kind of play around the most, seeing what could be possible, getting everybody excited, and formalizing those opportunities either into pilots of saying, we should take a look at this. This could be a good opportunity. Or implementation plans to say, we all should be doing this and here's why. So they're able to kind of package things up in a way that lets the executive team look at it and understand, what is this? What is our commitment? What do we hope to gain? Great, let's do it. Makes it really simple for things to kind of move forward. And then our day-to-day employees have time allotted to them, and they're encouraged to use the tools we have to explore how AI can help them out on a more individual basis. So if somebody who's, a designer or a writer is like, hey, I found this great use case for AI, they can talk to their team member that's on the activation team. That person can take a look at it and say, oh, this seems like something we should dig deeper into. Put a proposal together, get the executive team to commit to, hey, we want to pick up some licenses, or we want to spend 40 hours next month trying to figure out a pilot and figure out if this could work for our clients. Gives us a very clear path in either direction to motivate change without a lot of restriction. Secondly, when we thought about the tool side of it, tools should always be amplifying, not replacing. Yes, we could get a tool that writes emails for us, but if it's just doing it as well as we can and there's no real savings or benefit to it, it just feels like we're checking a box. Any tool that can help us dig deeper, go farther, and potentially clear time for higher priority things, as in it's certain tasks that are maybe providing no huge value from the time that's being committed to it, definitely something that we want to kind of invest in, but it shouldn't just be getting a tool for the tool's sake. Having a human in the mix was one of the biggest and first things we kind of all agreed on that it was super critical, because having a person truly guiding the inputs, gut checking the outputs, and refining things, make sure we hit our expectations of quality. These tools don't know everything. They make you feel like they know everything. I sometimes refer to the fact that they want to be a good dog, and they're just like, hey, did I do a good job for you? Yes, great, awesome. It's like, they always tell you, hey, yeah, that's a great idea, great insight. They're just trying to really prop you up quite a bit, and sometimes you do have to yell at the AI bot and bring it back to your level of like, you are doing this wrong, or you don't know what you're talking about, or your copy's trash, and it takes it gracefully, which is great. But our goal is to make sure that nothing leaves our hands that hasn't had a strong review or adjustment from a person. And part of the reason for that is that AI can definitely make work faster, but people really make it matter. If somebody doesn't give a damn about what they're handing you, AI or not, you feel it. Somebody's phoning it in, and it's even more apparent with the AI side of things. I've received stuff from AI that I look at and I'm like, hey, this provides no value. I've received stuff that somebody said, I ran this through AI, but I could tell that the person reviewed what that output was. They made some adjustments. They're not trying to pretend that they're not using tools helping, but they're also being critical of what they're receiving in a way that helps me know that they are kind of putting their best foot forward and understanding kind of what's going into that output. And then the final piece is that when it comes to these tools and when we're enabling the team to use them, Tutorials only take you so far, especially in the case of some of these chatbots. The possibilities are kind of endless of what you could use them for. Tutorials might let you know, the levers you can pull. But when it comes to understanding how it can really impact you in a positive way, our perspective is that you really need to be playing around as much as possible. Come up with weird ideas, try things out, see what happens. Be okay with failing. And that will get you to the point where you can kind of really start to see what some of those possibilities are. And part of that also goes into making sure as people are playing around and learning, we're sharing out as much of that knowledge as possible so people see it and they go, oh, I never even knew that this was possible, that I could do this myself. And now that unlocks a bunch of different thoughts of where this could go. We actually just had an agency meeting this past week and a team member was showing off something. And I had at least 6 people message me about it. And that person said, I've had 5 people follow up with me on that of like, I want to know more about how that works because I see all of those possibilities. Which kind of takes me to my next section and kind of is how we're going to be closing a bunch of this out is talking about AI in action, knowing that as an agency, we've been exploring different things. I grabbed kind of a cross section of different items across operations and execution to just show you how we're approaching things that actually impact our work and also showing you how that POV kind of applies to it. And stressing also where possible on those areas where we're making sure that the education part of it, not only of what's driving these tools that are helping our processes, but also helps people who might be more junior getting something out of it so they are learning and building up their capabilities. So it's not doing the work for them 100% of the way. And the work it is doing for them, it's helping them understand the why behind it. We're also only scratching the surface. I had a lot of things that were in here that I legit just pulled out because I'm like, this is a little bit too weird or inside baseball, as well as a bunch of things where I'm like, a year from now, even some of them are in this deck, I have no idea if we're even going to be pursuing any of this. But the level of commitment to kind of get to some of these outputs haven't been tremendous. Some of these things are still being piloted. Some of them are just things in theory that we're dabbling with that's not even formal. But my hope is you'll all be able to kind of get some interesting thought starters around that and get a little bit of a better understanding as to how we are thinking through each of these. So operations, I sometimes joke, is the most unglamorous part of what we do. Like no clients hiring us because we have a really tight operations team. However, operations is something that helps us be more effective with our time, as well as honestly makes potentially our workplace a really good place to work because nobody wants to be working hard. They want to be working smart and putting their time to the things that matter. One of the very first things, and this has to go back like 3 or 4 years, that I remember just like pointing to AI for like, oh, why not, was meeting outlines. It was me and a coworker were having a upcoming session with a client. We were doing a kickoff on a topic we normally actually don't talk to clients about. It was a little like niche. And we're like, okay, we need to like unpack these certain details, but like, what should our agenda be for the meeting? So we're sitting there in a conference room, starting to write down some ideas, and we just thought, let's just throw it at AI and see what it gives us. And we hit the button, it gave us an agenda, and we're like, oh, that's interesting. I disagree with like half of this, but this is interesting. So we proceeded for the next 20 minutes to go through and like strip out pieces of it, reorder the entire thing, adjust time duration that we wanted to put in there, dialed it into the specifics of our client situation, removed areas where we knew we already had the answers, got to something that was a little bit more workable. And we're like, oh, we feel good about this. And we could have just said, generate me an agenda and kick it over to the client and wing it. Our perspective is you really would have felt that in the room because it wouldn't have had a natural flow to what we know about the client, how they want to work, the depth of conversation we want to have. You also could always just like not give an agenda, which is honestly probably infinitely worse than sending the bad AI agenda. But ultimately going from something on the left here, which is, hey, let's meet, make sure you send me any questions ahead of time, to something structured that lets you know here's how we're using the time. You can tell which meeting is going to be more effective. There's no real harm in us saying, hey, give us an agenda to react to. Let's get away from the fear of the blank page and then putting our thoughts into what would make this the best possible meeting we could make it. If it was something that we completely disagreed with, we would have probably thrown it out. But we did have that kind of human in the mix to make sure we were getting to something that was workable. Next up is schedules, and I swear the meeting one was very basic, just a little easing us in. Schedules gets a little bit more complex. As an agency, at the scale we operate, we have some projects, where our creative team is executing literally 2,000 individual creative deliverables on behalf of a client in a short period of time. And that requires really tight creative operations and scheduling, and all the work we do hinges on schedules. if you try to ask AI to give you a schedule on something, it's going to give you its best guess of like, hey, I want to have a couple creative concepts due to the client next week. All right, here's what we think could work pacing-wise. It's going to use its best guess from what it can find online. It won't necessarily be something that works for you. Our approach has been refined over the years to really work in such a way that helps ensure our quality, knowing that we have certain touch points we like to have internally to make sure the right people are working on it at the right time to get to the next person, and the right people are reviewing it to make sure we're in lockstep to get to the client to get out the door. It's why we're able to turn around things aggressively fast, even when a client might say to us, hey, I don't know if this is really doable. Because of our mastery of kind of how we approach our schedules, we're able to do that. That said, that knowledge lives with our folks that have been in our creative operations team for 10 plus years, and our account team members that have been there for a very long time. Not everybody has that knowledge. If a new creative operations person comes in, they're not going to know how to build out a schedule from scratch. Even as they start to understand our format, the decision-making behind it really isn't going to be there either, of like, what are the nuances we need to be aware of? So we had a creative operations team member that decided to kind of just dig into the history of certain subsets of schedules that we knew were huge bottlenecks for. We need a schedule to get the work moving. What will that look like? Dug into our history and started building out a custom skill that learned from our historicals, guided by key criteria that our creative operations team know we're always missing, we're always asking for, we're always looking to clarify. To get us to the point where now, okay, we have something coming up, we can feed in some information and get a workable schedule back that is much closer to what we need to get out the door and get moving, especially if it's a quick turn project. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, like, how complex can schedules be? What kind of nuances could AI be missing? So just thought I'd throw out a few of the things out there you might not be aware of or think of when you're like, oh, I need a schedule to get something done. How long does the work actually take to execute? Do we need an internal kickoff handoff? Does the client owe us assets? Who needs to review it internally? Do we need internal revisions? How much time for client feedback? Client revisions? Are we proofreading? Is there a hard delivery date? Any holidays? Do we have budget left? Who's on PTO that week? And then how do we easily put this into our project management tool? Now, all of these things can kind of help be answered through some of the historicals as well as the guided efforts of building out that school to make sure we are prompting people to fill in the details. So now, instead of an AE saying, hey, I need this work next week, they can say, hey, I need to build out a schedule based on this deliverable, and it can guide them through the key questions. So the next time they're providing a schedule, let's say their internet's down and they need to give a schedule to our creative operations team, but they've been using this skill for the past few months. They can likely start to build that out from scratch because they know what things they need to be including now, and they know they're going to be less likely to receive pushback if they follow those steps. The next one's a little bit in the early stages, but it's something that's really fascinating to a lot of us here. We have many deliverables that are less about strategy and more about, less about strategy or like go-to-market assets, like creating a deliverable that's going to be, put on a billboard or a digital ad, and more about consolidating information to help influence that kind of work. So think about like a project brief. Building these docs can be very, very time consuming, especially for a new client, because we might be pitching them early on. They're now a client. We are having some initial kickoff meetings. They've given us some assets before, some assets now. None of the stuff really matches what any other client's giving us. And somebody needs to take all of that and boil it down to something that, our team will actually read if it's attached to a meeting agenda, which can be very difficult to say, just take a look at the one-pager before we all kick it off. So instead of having to chase all that around, we've been having this active thought around, okay, how do we bring all of this together in a way that helps our team focus more on bringing their kind of strategic expertise to the table and not having to do all the heavy lifting? So how this is kind of coming together for us is we kind of start with the right there, which is the project brief. That's our output. We know what our project briefs look like and the maximum of what it could contain. So let's use that as the baseline for what we're pointing AI at, and then we're going to start feeding it things. The statement of work, as I mentioned, proposals, research, client assets, meeting transcripts, and our experts' notes, anything that might have come up. And that's not all at once, but over time. As we get a new thing, throw it through the automation pipeline, keeping that brief in mind. And what that ends up creating for us is consolidated notes. Here's what matters, here's what doesn't, here's what we think can feed this brief, and then the biggest part is open questions and resolutions. Well, we don't really have an answer to this yet. Oh, we're going to be doing concepting for this big campaign that's due in a month. We have absolutely no brand context for them. So that's going to be an issue. It can help flag these things for people who are not familiar with all of the components that might go into a certain type of campaign or the brief, to be able to make more educated decisions and have those conversations before we're in a situation where it's much more critical to kind of make that happen. The exciting thing about this is it's very scalable. That project brief could be one of a dozen different documents that could be there, and there is that opportunity over time to have it learn from what those inputs are, to understand like, oh, this is what your usual proposals look like. Here's how you usually deliver research. The things that we control can be synthesized down a little bit better and be used to deliver better outputs. But we still have that expert review side of things, understanding that while the information that the tools might think are most important are consolidated, that might key something off in somebody's mind. A strategist, let's say, who's thinking about the audience is saying, well, this about their audience seems a little bit off. I'm going to dig into the raw information that they provided right now to see if the details I'm looking for are actually there, or whether I disagree with some of the foundational details that they have in there based on prior client experience, our own available research. So it really gives us a place not only to make sure we're getting what we need, move the work forward, but also just helps zero things in on what we know is most critical at the time without hiding all the deeper detail from people. So we're not just giving everybody a shiny one-sheeter on AI-generated doc and saying, this is all you get. All of this is still accessible to the team so that experts can focus on the key areas that are most important to them. And the final one in the operations side of things is this idea of chief of staff. As I've been working for 20-something years now, I forget, in the industry, I am in infinitely more meetings than I'd like to be. I do a lot less of the tangible work than I'd like to on a given week. Still have opportunities to get in the weeds here and there, but keeping tabs on everything that's happening across all of the different channels that I'm involved in for work purposes can be extremely daunting, and knowing like what's in front of me and what do I need to focus on right now. And you may have heard, for those of you that have been looking into more things around AI automation, the concept of a chief of staff is becoming pretty popular. So the idea is we have all these channels that feed our day-to-day for work: calendar, email, chat, tasks. Why can't I have a tool that takes a look at all of these and lets me know, here's what I'm seeing and what the outlook is? So we currently do have a tool internally, a skill, that will take a look at our Microsoft suite, takes a look at our chat, our task system that we have, Workfront, and gives us a snapshot of, here's how your week's looking, here's where you're overloaded, here are your top 3 priorities of things you need to focus on right now, and then broken down by meetings, email, and tasks. Here's where we think you might need to have some action. So if you have a meeting coming up on Thursday, it's a client presentation, and they're like, hey, you have literally no time Wednesday or Thursday before this meeting to prep, that can be an issue. Or you haven't accepted 15 of your meetings this week, you should probably get on top of that. It can flag those things. I actually had it flag incorrectly because I had already responded to it by the time I got back to it. I was like, I already got back to this, but it was, your CFO emailed about this thing, you should really get back to him, it's left unread. I'm like, yeah, he's probably gonna be annoyed at me at this point. But luckily I'd already gotten to that specific email, but I had seen my most recent readout. Because I have it running on a little bit of an automation, so it can check in on my Mondays and on my Wednesdays to let me know, how has my week started? How am I midweek? Am I actually making good progress on this? Now, the grayed out ones on the lower left are kind of where we could see this going in the future, which is instead of it being a tool that just kind of checks, what if it could do a little bit of the legwork for us? Not saying I want this thing to be firing off emails to clients or my CFO. That's pretty weird and creepy, and he would definitely feel it. But let's say a client emails and says, hey, I'm locked out of my website. How do I reset my password? I don't see why this tool couldn't say, hey, I did some research. This should be the path that they go to reset their password. I drafted an email for you with some bullets. Feel free to customize it as you see fit. Low stakes stuff that really nobody is impacted by getting on top of it through AI automation could be a huge benefit in that case. I definitely don't want it necessarily taking things too far and sending things on my behalf. But if I had a couple lightweight emails staged of follow-ups, that'd be a great thing to be able to have, and kind of has that nice continuity from the current state, which is just flagging, hey, you have some emails you should get back to I did a little bit of the effort for you. You can move forward. You can see where this is beneficial too, because I don't think I would ever be able to convince my company to be like, I need a personal assistant to help directly with this stuff. Not really a thing we do structurally, but a tool like this is definitely something that could be a fit and could be scaled regardless of who the employee is at the agency. So the next half, I want to talk a little bit about execution. This is, the things that are going out the door, and stuff that the clients are definitely a little bit more impressed by usually. And I feel like, probably get a little bit more of the glory when it comes to examples. And I treat new business as that. New business obviously has a big operation side, but if it's not for new business, you're not growing what you're doing. It's one of the first things clients are really interacting with us as an agency. Problem with new businesses is a lot of times it's senior employees who are driving it. They're the people with the expertise, the knowledge of not only the industry, but also what we do as a company. And they are involved day in, day out. It's actually a good portion of what I'm doing on a monthly basis. Because I have the ability to scope and estimate and make sure we're not overcommitting to something that's going to hurt us, as well as assess whether or not something would be a good fit. But it can be hours to even do a top-level snapshot of is this even worth us digging a little bit deeper into? And it can be bottlenecking, where I can only take on so much in a given week as part of that assessment. And I would love to pull in other people, but I have that 20 years of experience, and I am not the most equipped to distill down what matters and what doesn't based on all possible combinations, let's say, of what a website could be. So something we started to build out was kind of creating our own assessment model, taking in all of these things that we've been doing over, our company's 25 years old this year. I've been with the company for about 11 years. All of the pivots I've made to how we approach estimating some of our website work, really just collecting as much of the good examples I could find of RFPs, proposals, estimates, transcripts from meetings, question and answer sessions that might have happened, and any CRM notes, and building out a model that helps us understand, well, what are the criteria that sways a budget or a scope or a timeline, or whether or not we decided to pursue it. During RFPs, we legit just said, nope, we're not going to do it. And here's why we said, so it can feed that into it. What that means then with that model in play, anytime we have a new opportunity, drop it in there. Give me a gut check on this. How does this fit for what we do? What things should we be concerned about? And it gives us that scope and budget POV. Oh, this scope's similar to ones you've done in the past. Budget, usually non-existent, unfortunately, when it comes to RFPs. But here's what we feel about the budget. Is it a fit for the agency? Are there specific risks? Are there opportunities based on our current portfolio and where we want to grow? What are the open questions that we don't have answered that are present in your proposals and the Q&A that you really need to get to? And it goes as far as literally just drafting what those bulleted questions should be based on ones we've already asked in the past. So it's not AI generating that, it's just taking our own words and surfacing that, which then creates an opportunity brief, a way for us to take a look at this and say, hey, what is this opportunity and should we move forward on it? So what can happen is drop an RFP in there, see what it tells me. Sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I disagree. If I agree with it and it says it's not a fit, I delete that chat and I move on with my day. So it used to be maybe a couple hours of digging into who the company is, the RFP, chatting about it with somebody internally, taking a look at their website, becomes a quick snapshot even to say, are there any huge red flags here? So for example, we build a lot of our websites in WordPress. Somebody says Drupal is mandatory. Why am I even looking at this? And sometimes that's buried super deep into the proposal. Or you have to check the website yourself and view the source and kind of unfurl the fact oh yeah, this is a Drupal site. That could be of concern. So this helps us get ahead of that, not to mention all of the criteria that goes into the assessment model. You now can ask questions of it. Well, why did you reject this? What's most important about this? Why did we land where we landed? And it helps guide that for, let's say, more junior team members that would love to be more involved with new business, help to learn the why behind it instead of being in the dark and being well, I just got to wait for Levi to give me a scope and budget. And I hope the thing I made up off the top of my head is real. And then when I shred it, I have to, feel really bad about it. But it's you'll learn eventually. It'll be fine. Creative exploration is a very sensitive one for sure. Nobody loves the idea of AI-generated stuff just being pushed out there. The number of times I feel over the past couple of days from folks that were speaking and folks that were attending, talking about AI-generated menus at restaurants has been a very hot topic. And that's not necessarily something we're really looking to do as an agency. However, there is a space for creative AI usage we feel as part of our creative exploration. Convincing a client that they should be moving forward with a creative concept or an idea based on words is an extremely difficult task. I've maybe met a few creative directors in my lifetime that could do that very effectively. I've met some that believe that they got the client on board with the idea based on describing it, but they couldn't have been more disconnected from what they were speaking to, which is often why, from a creative pitching standpoint, we'll lean on mood boards or reference assets to try to sell through the concept of saying, hey, this is what we're thinking it's going to be like. Do you buy into this? And then we can proceed forward. That said, that's still a few steps removed from what will really come to life. Sometimes if we're super, super lucky, we can do high fidelity mock-ups of, hey, this is what we want to do for you. Do you love the dream? Do you love the vision? Whether that's, more detailed storyboards or full out mocks based on available assets. However, usually when you're in that pitch mode, time is a huge issue. And that ability to go from we have all the information to we need an approach that they want to take is way too short to make a lot of that happen. So that's where the AI generated assets can come in handy. When our creative team says, we've come up with a bunch of ideas of how we could pursue this particular campaign. We know how we want to visualize it once we do the shoot. Can we create assets now that sell through that vision? That's a level deeper than doing storyboards, a level deeper than grabbing some random images online and saying, this is kind of the vibe we're going for. That can really get the client to commit to where we want to be going, especially because that pitching process is what justifies the budget. The client's not feeling it. They're possibly going to say no, or the budget could shrink back down. If they love where you're going and the idea maybe has some additional legs to it, but it requires more budget, they might be more willing to bite and take it to that next level. So our ability to then take our creative expertise, come up with ideas, leverage AI tools to generate some assets, and then still having the human hand doing finalization pass of compositing things in, doing some low-level retouching to get the assets to the point where we feel like the client's really going to understand the vision is a huge thing that can help us from a pitch process. But then, let's say we win the business, what comes next? Well, we're not really doing anything with that initial asset. It kind of goes by the wayside. We're then stepping into the proper production. Let's do the shoot. Let's purchase stock assets or shoot our own stuff that's going to be composited back in. Let's have our people do all the heavy retouching and kind of getting everything to kind of come to life. And it lets us ensure that we still are able to deliver on the vision of what we wanted to achieve, but also at the quality we want it to be, because our creative team is very particular. They want to get to where they want to get to. And if there's no restrictions we have on our side of things of getting there, we're going to kind of take it to the fullest. And we've had the opportunity to produce end products like this that aren't AI generated Josh Allen on screen. And yes, it's always, fantastic to be able to throw Josh Allen on screen in Buffalo. Easy win as far as a happy slide. This isn't, hey, make me an AI image of Josh Allen on a field of buffaloes. It is something that was created by our team by hand, but some of the initial ideation, the buy-in, was achieved by selling through where we wanted to go using AI tools, which can be extremely helpful. And the final item I wanted to talk on, and I did realize when going through my talk that gets a little bit heavier and a little geeky, but I'm in the digital side, so you had to expect at least a little bit of it. We had a client of ours that we were doing paid media for, and they were selling tickets to try to get people to go to a sporting event. And we were doing our best to optimize our ads. However, we were not responsible for reporting, which is pretty irregular. And for some reason, we just couldn't get their BI team on the phone. And the data the client was giving us was weird, that they were seemingly getting from their BI team, or so we were told. And the data we were seeing in the e-commerce side of Google Analytics didn't make sense either. So we were making daily decisions to make this campaign successful based on a lot of speculation, which definitely gave us a lot of anxiety about how do we spend most effectively. So we dug into the Ticketmaster platform to figure out what can we possibly do. Not a lot of levers we could pull for Google Analytics. It's enter your code and pray, I guess. However, there was one spot in there that was like, oh, you can just add a custom pixel in here if you want to. It's kind of a catch-all, no real documentation on it. Just like, yeah, put a pixel in here, it's fine. So we're sitting there wondering like, okay, we don't have a lot of time to sell tickets for this. How do we solve this problem? How do we get more visibility? And kind of half jokingly, we were like, well, what if we just make our own pixel and our own reporting system? And then over the span of the next 72 hours, we built something very specific that could work for Ticketmaster to get the information we needed out. We were able to not necessarily vibe code in the way that you may have seen on the prior presentation, which is more like tailored to specific web side of things, but we had a specific set of criteria of what we wanted to achieve with our in-house developers who have built not systems like this, but web applications before to guide it towards what we wanted to achieve, saying we need a pixel that accepts this kind of information. We need to visualize the information in this certain way. Here's how we need to be able to drill things down. Here's what we want to be able to notice from how our tickets are increasing or the came from code so we can get attribution. And what we learned from doing this was, oh yeah, Google Analytics is taking 24 to 48 hours to accurately report on tickets sold. And we were looking at that as data 24 hours later, assuming, oh yeah, like everything's good and kosher here, but no, it wasn't. Additionally, Ticketmaster had built-in attribution that they said was unreliable. And as we dug more into the data, raw data we were getting, we realized the attribution's there, it just never makes it to the final place it needs to be. So we were able to increase our attribution by upwards of 50% of knowing what ads were driving sales in Ticketmaster based on digging in here. Now, had we not leveraged AI for this to build out a custom pixel and a dashboard for a company that did not have this and didn't need this to live for an extended period of time, would have taken weeks. And by then, the events would have passed, so it wouldn't have mattered. And our ability to kind of get to this point helped us make smarter decisions about how we proceed forward. It also gave us a better appreciation for how far these things could go and what some of those limitations were. We did fight with this quite a bit of using AI to kind of get us to this endpoint. It has opinions on how it wants to build things, but our team builds websites and web applications all the time. So we're able to look at it and say, this isn't a good user experience, this is confusing. We need this type of filter, we need this type of thing. Hey, the data's coming in wrong because your date filter isn't sorting correctly. That information really helped guide us towards something that was workable for us. End of the day, client never saw this. This was strictly us using this to inform our decision making and really helped us be a lot more effective in that. So wrapping everything up here, hope that was an interesting crash course in kind of some of the things we have explored and are exploring. The good news is I survived even though Flash is dead. And I'm kind of glad I did, but I also know that things are going to keep changing over time. Career is not going to be stagnant in regards to how technology disrupts things. But ultimately, AI really expands what's possible on this, but we sharpen it into what works. And without that human element being involved and bringing that expertise and doing what we can to share our expertise with others, it's really not going to hit where it needs to. That's all I mainly got. If anybody has any questions, happy to take them. Yes. Is true and accurate. Yeah, so in our situation, we had limited access to Ticketmaster's data, as in like the full reporting suite just based on our relationship with the organization, which makes sense. They have to keep certain things under wraps. However, we could see some core indicators like per game, how many tickets were sold, but not deeper details about the why, the how, price tags, things like that from our limited view there. So we're able to directly connect what we were seeing in their dashboard to what we were seeing on the reporting side. A big part of building out the pixel was actually just proving that the analytics data we were seeing was incorrect, which let us know, stop paying attention to that at least until a couple days have passed. So it was good for historicals, not for actuals. And also helped us unpack a little bit of understanding as to how our client was doing some custom attribution based on percentages to say like, hey, we're attributing 15% of our sales in this to this channel, even though we know we can't fully track it based on our historicals. Help us get a little bit closer to like understanding that. Any other questions? In the back? Yeah. Yeah, and from a reporting standpoint, it's completely unrelated to the AI side. We do have some clients where we do report on, literally here's how much profit our advertising generated for you. As in, we have the criteria of we know our spend, we know what was purchased, we know your costs, and we're able to kind of get to that point, which then creates that opportunity. It can definitely. I think it can help you get closer to it. One of the things we're actually actively pursuing, exploring is we have our reporting platforms we use, but we're trying to find some tools that do a better job of letting people just do natural language querying of that data, because not everybody's going to dive as deep as some of us are in the digital marketing team. So that ability for a client that maybe is not as in depth for what we're working on, but we do have access to their Google Analytics data with some e-commerce stuff. That ability for somebody who's more junior, or even if we're not directly involved and it's just a media team specific thing, to ask questions of what specific attributed campaigns are driving the strongest ROI. Let me know what that is. The math is not overly difficult, presuming you have the information at hand. And I would say, there's definitely a bigger swing towards companies who are just I want to know what the dollars I'm spending with you do for me. Not only obviously from things that we know are very attributable, hey, we sold a ticket, great, that's easy. But clients I want to be known as the biggest company in Buffalo. It's how do you put a dollar sign on that? It's kind of difficult, but even that I feel is an interesting opportunity for AI tools that are consuming so much of what's online to help surface some of that information so we can at least show the benefit of some of the work we're doing, whether that's on the SEO side or the PR side, and some of that more earned reputation that we're building up for clients. Yes. Oh, HR, my nemesis. No, I'm kidding. They're great. HR actually has a platform we're using, Bamboo HR, that we're using mainly just to improve our workflows. But one of the big things it has, I'm actually super excited for, has its own capability to have all of your company documents uploaded and people can just ask questions of it. So for example, if I'm hey, what is our paternity policy? What are the holidays this year? What do I do if it's my anniversary or my PTO is about to run out? And it can get to that information infinitely quicker than scrolling through the whatever page handbook and all the minutia there, which can be hugely beneficial. We're also using it to help support the cultural side of things, which is really important to us too, of can we find an easier way to surface people's anniversaries and birthdays and to talk about the work that we're doing in the community and how we can support each other as just people, not coworkers. And that's kind of our place for that. And we're actually kind of making it very distinctly separate from the day-to-day of the work, because having those two things bleed over can kind of sometimes be rough, where it's you're trying to celebrate your coworker for having, a work anniversary or one of their recent, things that they did. They ran a marathon. But then also you're getting a Teams chat being hey, I need this thing in an hour. Just really kills the vibe of yeah, we're a really connected workplace here. Work still has to happen, but having a breather is not a bad thing as well. With hiring, we don't use anything in respect to processing any intake for oh, you sent us a resume and we're going to use that to accept or knock you out of the process, any more than some of the basic platforms do, Indeed. If we say, hey, we need you to be in Buffalo, and somebody says, I'm in the United Kingdom, it's well, this isn't going to work out. But beyond that, we don't really use anything deeper there.